Good morning. Welcome to Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. It's a beautiful Sunday morning, Mother's Day weekend. We're out in the garden. We're going to look at a couple of things here. It's going to be a bit of a shorter show maybe today, but that's okay. We're in a new garden, a fairly new planting. We did some bulb planting in here last year, so we're going to look at the bulbs. Just quickly, I just want to mention our twig fence. If you ever are looking for a place to get rid of a lot of prunings and things like that, if you're doing your yearly pruning on trees and things, it's a great way to build up an eco-friendly fence. It gets lots of birds and things living in it. And every year we just pile our prunings on top. They break down to the bottom. And we've had this here for over 20 years, and we just keep adding to it, and it makes a more and more dense hedge. Now that we're back up to a good height again, we're going to start planting some vines on here, maybe some climbing roses, so we'll do that another day. But today we're going to look at bulbs a little bit. We did this planting down this alley here. I don't know if Laura can sort of get the thing. I'll back up a little bit, and you can sort of get a feel for the alley of tulips we did. We were looking at some new varieties that have really only been available to the cut flower industry, and there's some small distributors bringing these bulbs in now into Ontario, and we're getting them from some of the smaller cut flower specialty growers that are out there. So we've had some really fantastic varieties this year. As you can see, they're all more or less blooming right now. We did have earlies, mids, and late season tulips. But what happened was, after that little hot stretch of a few days that we had, we ended up with a long stretch of really cool weather. That long stretch of really cool weather basically stopped our tulips from growing and just put them in a holding pattern. Well, now that the weather's warmed up, the mids and late season ones are jumping ahead, and our early season ones are still kind of finishing up. So it put on a pretty decent show, but the color scheme was a little bit altered. And that's kind of the one fun thing about bulbs. You can plan an early, a mid, and a late season display of different colors, but then Mother Nature will always, remind you that that she's the boss, and you never know what you'll get. So we've had a great time with these tulips. There's some beautiful ones in here. But I really want to talk about just a couple of a planting point and a maintenance point. I'm going to bend down more. So when we plant our bulbs, and if you look at how they're planted, they're not planted in sort of individual holes of like 5 to 10 bulbs, so you get a clump. Generally what we do when we plant bulbs is we mingle them through the beds. Now what I did with this one, we had a small amount of each bulb. I did like 5 on this side and 5 of the same bulb on the opposite side of the path. Just sort of trying out a pattern. But you can see where we've planted them. We've got perennials here and here and here and here, and the bulbs are in and through. Now, why we do that is, well, for us it makes it a little more natural looking. Not that these tulips are anything natural, but the main thing to think about with bulbs is if you want to keep them going year after year, you need to let the foliage grow. And the foliage can be a little bit ugly while it's doing that. So you're sometimes maybe inclined to cut them right back when the flowers fade. But if you do that, you're weakening the bulbs. And your bulbs are only going to last, maybe a second year if you have bulbs that aren't strong. We want our bulbs to increase. And in our dry, sandy soil, tulips grow and do increase in many cases for us, which is great. So we do 2 things. When we plant, and we're planting in amongst the perennials, we get in really close. So there's an allium here, There's some hardy geraniums here. And then there's tulips right here in between them. So what's going to happen is that when this tulip is finished blooming, all this perennial foliage is going to come up and hide the ripening bulb foliage. The bulb foliage will still continue to photosynthesize, produce food, strengthen the bulb, but we're not looking at clumps of dying tulip foliage. We won't even have to come back and clean this up because the perennials will have completely covered the foliage over. You see it a little bit at the back here too. We've got some allium foliage, and this is crucial with alliums. The allium foliage starts to die down before the plants bloom. So you've really got to try to have perennials around them to hide that dying allium foliage to get the best display of your alliums. But you can do it with all bulbs. So that's that planting tip. Now, what happens when we've got bulbs that are finished blooming? Quite often you'll hear, oh, just take the flower head off, like this, and leave the stalk. The thinking behind that is, well, the stalk is still green, it's photosynthesizing, but who wants to look at a bunch of chopped off heads? You know, that's really not the look we want. So what we do with the cutting back the bulb heads, and we only do this with our tulips and our daffodils primarily, because we don't want these tulips to set seed. Our little species ones, if Laura, there's a few little species ones in here. I don't know if you can see them on the camera or not, Laura. They're right there on the ground. I don't know if you can even bend that over to see them. These little species tulips, these little red guys here, we allow those to reseed themselves, and they're perfectly happy doing that. But the big hybrids, we don't want them to produce seed because the seed would be useless anyway. But we don't just take the head off and leave a stump. We'll go right down. So these are all finished here. We'll go right down to where that first leaf comes off the stem. You see that one?
Yep.
Where the first leaf comes off the stem. And we'll cut the stalk off there. So we're taking off the old flower stalk and whatever flower bud or, you know, seed head that's forming is left. We'll get rid of those, but we'll leave the flowers here. I'll do it again. Bottom of the first leaf, and we deadhead. That way we just have a few leaves there, but they're doing the work to keep that bulb nice and strong. They don't look too bad. They're going to get swamped out by all these perennials as they die down, and then that's all we have to do. Only the very odd one will we have to pull out that we can see signs of drying up and looking kind of crappy. So that's my two main tips today. That's what I wanted to get across. Do we have any questions at the moment, Laura?
No, but Jeff, do you need to fertilize your tulips when they're growing?
That's a good question. Feeding the tulips, not a bad time to put some fertilizer on them at this stage. But if you want best results, as they're emerging in the spring, sprinkle some fertilizer around them then. Then they'll have their entire growth cycle that they're above ground to use that fertilizer. But certainly right now, it wouldn't be a bad idea to fertilize this good, healthy tulip foliage to strengthen those bulbs. Because, you know, that bulb has gone through a lot. You think of that little bulb has put all that foliage, big, huge flower, in some cases more than one flower. This one here, for example, 3 flowers off one bulb. Takes a lot of energy out of those flowers. So give them some food. Even if you do it with a liquid food and just kind of put a splash of liquid fertilizer mixed in water, right at each tulip. You can do it that way. What I'm going to do with these 2 strips here is they're going to get a granular fertilizer that we then water in, and that works well too.
So what do you do? Any tips to protect tulips from chipmunks?
Well, that is a challenge. Protecting bulbs, sometimes, I know people will get squirrels and things like that, and they can be really nasty because they'll just come along, take a bite out of the stem, tip the flowers over. If you're having that problem, look at some of the products like Scoot. There's another one I'm thinking of and I can't think of the name, but there are several sort of animal deterrent sprays out there that if you're having a real problem, just spray the foliage with them, and that's usually enough to deter them without being too offensive. Yeah, you might need to do it a couple of times if you get rains in between, but that's maybe your best bet. Another option is, I don't know, throw some peanuts out there, feed the squirrels, maybe they'll leave your bulbs alone. It's a hard one to call because generally our squirrels that we have here tend to leave them alone. They usually hang out at the bird feeders and tend to leave our bulbs alone, which we're thankful for. But I know it doesn't always work for some people. But I think the animal deterrent sprays that you can get at your garden centers is probably your best bet. Yeah. Any more questions, Laura, today?
That's the only question.
Boy, all the moms must be had joying a sleeping in day. So we'll leave you with that. Listen to the radio show Saturday mornings, 9 a.m. CKDO 1580 or 1077 FM, or you can listen on your computer, ckdo.ca. We'll be back again next Sunday for another Let's Get Growing Facebook Live. And also, Mason House Gardens will be open on the dates, Laura. Thursday, 18th, 19th, 20th. Is that one? Am I getting the dates right?
18th, 19th, 20th, yes.
May 18th, 19th, 20th will be open 10 till 2. We got lots of really great plants that I'll be featuring all week on Instagram and Facebook, available later on this week. They're calling for a couple of nights of frosty weather, so I hope you haven't planted all your annuals out yet. And we'll leave you there, and
Two quick questions. What type of granular fertilizer would you use for your bulbs?
Okay, so what I've been doing the last few years, and especially in this area that is very, very poor soil, but I want to get a little bit of nutrients in there to get the plants a good head start, I use the granular hen manure. Granular hen manure is an excellent natural fertilizer, and it is supposed to deter squirrels. So there's another option. They don't like the smell of it. It is supposed to keep them away.
And one more. Betty says her friend has grower beds, I think, at her townhouse. Grower beds? Maybe raised, I don't know. The bunnies keep eating everything. Any idea for a repellent?
You know what? Try the hen manure fertilizer. It might deter the rabbits too. I can't say for certain. Either that or, again, sort of the liquid animal repellent sprays like Scoot or Plant Skid. That's the other name of the other one. Plant Skid or Scoot are both spray-on deterrents that if you have raised beds, you could even just spray it around the perimeter, and that may help keep those critters away. But unfortunately, they got to eat too, so if we put food out there, sometimes that's what they're going to eat. Unfortunately. Anyway, any more questions?
Well, that's it.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Happy Mother's Day to all you moms. And Let's Get Growing.